Hi, this is Pat Kahn, the development manager for the Ubuntu server and OpenStack team. We're at the Ubuntu Developer Summit, June 2014, and our last session of the first day today is the security team reads mean tweets, which is playing on the meme that's been going on with Jimmy Fallon's show, and then also I think Linus Torvalds has done something recently. Anyway, Robbie Bassett is going to lead the session, so I'll pass it to you, Robbie.
Okay, so we have in this Hangout 3 colleagues from the Ubuntu security team, and we've also got Chuck and me from the server team. So we will be reading mean tweets. We'll be doing that soon. The session started off as a thought that I'd seen a pile of things in the community, especially around the time of the Heartbleed vulnerability. There are many questions that we fielded, many people popping into IRC channels and so on with various Ubuntu server security related questions. So I thought it might be an idea to have a session for the community to ask their questions directly of the Ubuntu server team and get sort of best practice responses on what they should be doing on these issues. So we have an IRC channel. It's hash Ubuntu UDS DevOps 2. If anyone's got any questions, you can ask us in there, and I will relay any questions on, and we'll hopefully get them for you. And while we're waiting for any questions to come in, I had some things that I'd gathered from beforehand, which is really my kind of impression of FAQs that come along for the security-related FAQs that tend to come along in the server IRC channel. So I was going to start with those. So we have Mark, Seth, and John from the Ubuntu server team. So Ubuntu security team, sorry. So the first question I had was just to get us started. Can you tell us exactly what the Ubuntu security team does?
Sure. So is that a complaint? People ask that question all the time. What do you guys do? So we do a few things. We do all the security updates. So we maintain all the Ubuntu stable releases, all the security updates for all the software that comes with each release. We also do active development. So we want to make the distro as secure as possible. So we constantly add a bunch of new security features in order to make security vulnerabilities harder to use or exploit. And we also do active development for things like AppArmor and eCryptFS, which are used to not only secure the Ubuntu client, like the phone, but also the Ubuntu server. It's technologies that are used in the cloud that we can use to secure all the software that we run.
Okay, great. So might come back to some of the answers you gave me there. Maybe we can expand on those a little bit later. So one of the most common things that really triggered my thought here was we were getting a ton of visitors, I noticed, to the Ubuntu server IRC channel very soon after the Heartbleed vulnerability was announced. And there were many questions being asked there. The biggest concern that users had was that they, for some reason, hadn't picked up the security update for Heartbleed. They would ask questions like, when are Ubuntu going to release a fix for the Heartbleed vulnerability? And there are also questions such as, I've typed OpenSSL version, and it's told me what version I'm running, and the OpenSSL security advisory says that that version is vulnerable, so what's going on?
Yeah, those are questions that came up often during the Heartbleed update period, which is a bit surprising to me because if you manage servers right now, you should at least be subscribed to the Ubuntu Security Announce list. That's the list that you can subscribe to and get all the Ubuntu advisories. So as soon as we publish package updates, you'll get an email that says exactly which version of the package we've updated, what the vulnerability was, and how to update your system. For example, when we did the USN for the Heartbleed, which was, hold on, I'll paste it in the channel, which was this one, the same morning that, or the same afternoon that Heartbleed became public, we published our updates. So people would have gotten this advisory in email have seen which exact versions of packages that they would have need to install to mitigate the Heartbleed vulnerability. Like a lot of Linux distributions, we backport security fixes instead of updating package versions, and that there was a lot of confusion around that fact because the upstream advisory and there were a whole bunch of sites on the internet that would tell people to make sure that they're running 1.01 something of OpenSSL to make sure that they're patched for Heartbleed, when in fact most of the Linux distributions backported that patch, so the version number didn't mean anything in the context of security updates in Ubuntu and in other Linux distributions. So you really need to check what version number of the package you're using, and make sure that the version number that we've released is the one that's actually installed on your system. Of course, one thing that we recommend is to install all the security updates. It kind of surprised me that when Heartbeat came out, people were rushing to figure out how to install security updates. But that's just one out of the many that we publish every week. It wasn't the only high impact one. We have high impact kernel updates. We have high impact all kinds of other software updates. So this is something that people should be doing, not only when the media picks up on a story.
Okay, so maybe I can try and pick that apart a little bit, step by step. So let's say that there is a vulnerability that's been announced, and an Ubuntu server user wants to figure out if he's received the correct update for that vulnerability, and if not, how to get it. So you mentioned Ubuntu security notices. Would you say that that's the first place that users should go to in order to be able to track these down?
Right, you can do that. There's a mailing list archive that has all the Ubuntu security notices there. Another place that people can go is to the... so every security vulnerability has what we call a CVE number, which is just a number that tracks a particular vulnerability. So there's on our website, www.ubuntu.com/USN, which is the archive of our security notices. There's a link there called Ubuntu CVE Tracker, which is the database that we actually use to track each of those particular CVE numbers or each of those particular vulnerabilities. So if you click on that link, you can then type in the CVE number there and search for it. So you can, for example, for Heartbleed, it was CVE 2004, CVE-2014-0160. So if we go there and we type that in, it comes up with this page here, which I'll put in the channel again. And that page will tell you what the USN was in the references section, who the update was assigned to, and what versions of packages got released that contain that fix. So basically any vulnerability that has a CVE number, you can type into that database and get the current status on.
Okay, that sounds great. And just to be clear, then the CVE number isn't a unique thing to Ubuntu, is it? It's a little bit wider than that.
Right, exactly. It's an industry standard. It's MITRE that publishes CVE numbers, and it's an industry-wide standard just to be able to track vulnerabilities. So when people talk about, for example, Heartbleed, in this case there was a nice name and a logo to go with it, but in most other vulnerability cases, so that everybody can talk about the same vulnerability, the MITRE.org assigns a serial number to it, which is a CVE number. It's just an identifier that allows everybody to make sure that they're talking about the same issue.
Great, okay, so that means that if there's a vulnerability out in the wild that people have heard about, they'll usually be able to find the CVE number, and that number is the same across all distributions. Everyone should be referring to the same thing.
Exactly.
Then users can go to the CVE tracker, and you've pasted the link there on IRC, type in that number, which is the unique identifier for that vulnerability, and then find out everything about the status of that particular vulnerability in Ubuntu.
Right, exactly. And this is our database that we use to track these numbers. So the database is not necessarily formatted for for somebody to get the most detailed information out of this. The USN publication notices are probably the best way of keeping up to date with our updates.
Okay, and I see that the USN page has got a link to the CVE tracker, and the CVE page for the Heartbleed vulnerability, the 0160 CVE, has got a link back to the USN that referred to it. So
exactly,
you'll be able to find all the information by following the links. Okay, so let's say that I'm running 1204 precise, and I'm concerned about the Heartbleed vulnerability. So then I'm looking at the CVE page, and I see in the table there are two entries. There seem to be two tables, and they both mention precise. I can see that there are two packages mentioned there. One of them, it says precise not affected. The other one, it says precise released, and there's a version number next to it.
So there are two different packages in the archive that were affected by Heartbleed, or potentially affected by Heartbleed. One of them is called OpenSSL 098, and the other one's called OpenSSL. So OpenSSL 098 is the old version of SSL that's in the Universe archive, and is also tracked here, but the Heartbleed didn't affect that old version of OpenSSL. So in this case, it's marked not affected because it wasn't an issue in that package. But the main package in Ubuntu, which is called simply OpenSSL, that one was affected in precise. And beside that, we can see that it says released with a version number 101 for Ubuntu 5.12.
Okay. So with that version number, how would I go to my machine that's running precise and determine what version number my machine is running for OpenSSL?
So if you're doing it on a server, you would do it on the command line. So the best thing to do would be to look at the USN, and we usually have the name of the binary package in that USN. So if you look at the USN 2165-1, if you look at the bottom, the update instructions section, you have Ubuntu 12.04 LTS, and then it says libssl 1.0.0. That's the name of the binary package for OpenSSL.
And that's different from the source package, right?
Right. Sometimes they're the same, but usually it's different. So we tend to list the binary package there. So you could simply type dpkg-l libssl 1.0.0, and that would show you which version is currently installed.
Okay, so I'm just typing that into IRC so everyone can see it. Yeah, and that does show me on my machine. Interestingly enough, it's cutting off the version on my machine because it's quite long.
Exactly, you can make your window bigger. Another command you could...
Yeah, I was going to suggest there's another command which I'll paste in, which I use, which is this one. Yeah, the show and W are the same thing. And that gives me the got a bunch of people suggesting it. So that gives me the full result, and I can just paste in what I get on my machine. This is running Trusty, so it's telling me that I've got both AMD64 and i386 versions installed, and they're both on that version.
Right. There's also this that you can try, app cache policy, and that will show you which version is currently installed and which version is available in the archive. So that would allow you to see if you're currently using the latest version, or if there's a newer one available.
Thanks very much. I think that explains very clearly what to do from vulnerability to finding out what's going on your particular machine. If anyone's got any questions or that wasn't clear, just ask us an IRC and we'll try and clarify. So one of the things you mentioned there was that the version here, I mean, as an example, I can type in OpenSSL version, and I'll just paste that into IRC. What I get there if I do that, now of course I'm running Trusty, so it's more recent than the Heartbleed issue, but I see 101F. Actually, off the top of my head, I think that the one that they're claiming is newer. So what's the difference here between 101F and I mean, the version number said 101F, so I guess that matches up, but it doesn't match up with the one in the security announcement.
Right. So the one in the security announcement Right, so 101F is basically the upstream OpenSSL version number. So they release a version every few months, which is a whole new release that may or may not contain new features, new bugs, new bug fixes and security fixes. And what we do in Ubuntu and in a lot of other Linux distros is we take only the security relevant parts of the new versions and we bring that back to the version that we shipped with. So in other words, right now I'm running Trusty, so I also have 101F. So in other words, for the whole lifetime of Trusty, we'll be maintaining version 101F and only backporting security patches to it, instead of releasing a whole new OpenSSL upstream version. And the reason why we do that, there's a few different reasons why we do that. The first reason is a lot of upstream software evolves rapidly. In other words, they release new versions that introduce new features and possibly introduce new bugs and new regressions. If we simply updated to the latest version, we could possibly introduce new regressions or new untested scenarios in a stable Ubuntu version. In other words, if we change a single line of code to fix a security issue, it's much easier for us to test and make sure that it works with the software that we've shipped in Trusty, rather than ship a 20,000 line new complete version of OpenSSL, which may cause problems with some versions of software that we shipped. It's always a compromise between what's the best between shipping a whole new version and being able to test it properly and make sure we don't introduce regressions to our users.
Mm-hmm. So we're both looking at the same list of questions, so I'm jumping around a little bit because I think that some of them kind of follow on from previous ones.
Sure.
So what I'm thinking now is there's one question here which is to do with automatic security updates. So what's your view on whether users should have security updates installed automatically? I know that when I expressed this opinion, some people objected that, well, they don't know, I mean, security updates can break things, and they don't want things to break. And then there was this kind of discussion of, well, what would you prefer, a broken system because an update made something to fail, or a compromised system because you failed to install a security update and now your system's been compromised?
Exactly.
So I was wondering what you thought about those, about whether people should have automatic updates turned on, how they might do that, and what happens, how do you deal with regressions if they do occur?
So people need to install security updates. Not installing them is not an option. Whether they install them automatically because they've turned that feature on, or they install them after going through a test environment first and installing them with a 2-day delay in their production systems, that's up to them to evaluate whether that risk is acceptable for them or not. Sure, installing security updates, we've hit regressions before. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Sometimes the upstream patch that the project releases cause issues. Sometimes the backport that we've done to earlier Ubuntu versions cause issues. Sometimes there's compatibility issues between some software that was using a library in an incorrect fashion, but the bug wasn't visible until we backported some security fix. I mean, it happens. It doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. It certainly does happen. Again, patching your production systems after testing security updates, for some people that's acceptable. For others, they don't have the resources or the time to do that, so I think automatic updates in that case is worthwhile. Even if they do hit a regression that may affect them, as you said, I'd much rather deal with an update regression and being able to easily roll back to the previous version rather than being compromised and having to reinstall my server and be worried that the data that I had on my server has been compromised or altered or worse. Yeah, it's up to each person to decide what they're comfortable with.
But I guess what we're sure about is that they don't want to not do anything. They want to either install them automatically or install them manually, but not install them at all.
Exactly. One thing that they need to do is schedule reboots. I've seen a lot of people install the security updates automatically, but they never reboot their server or they never restart it. And we have kernel updates coming out every 6 weeks. Some of them, for example, the one that came out last week, are root escalations from local users. So if you never reboot your server and 6 months down the line somebody finds a simple vulnerability in PHP, they can now combine that with the kernel root escalation issue from the kernel that you're still running that you've never upgraded, and they're now root on your server because you never schedule any reboots. So sorry, uptime haters, but you need to schedule reboots.
What do you advise in terms of, because some people are really looking for that uptime, and so like, what is the frequency of reboots that you recommend?
Well, it's hard to say. We can go, we can go 6 months without having a kernel security issue that's, critical or high, and all of a sudden
that would
we'll
require
get one.
a reboot. Okay.
Right, and sometimes a lot of the kernel security issues are driver specific, for example. So in some environments, you don't get that security issue because you're not running that particular driver, and in some other environments you are. So it really depends on the actual issue, and it's hard to say. It's hard to give a rule of thumb when you should reboot, but when you do get kernel updates, it's probably important to do it.
Yeah, I do reboot more frequently than I used to, but I will tell you, Mark, I was avoiding making eye contact with you earlier when it came to applying update security fixes. I've gotten better, but I understand. I've been in the bad group of community citizens.
But it depends. It depends what you do, right? If it's your laptop and you don't want to do it right away and you decide to wait 2 weeks, well, that's
yeah, it's different, yeah.
Right,
versus
it's different than
a server, yeah.
Right, a web server with PHP, and there's a big vulnerability in PHP, and that contains confidential data, and it's always a balance of what acceptable risk is.
Yeah, and I have definitely learned not to wait too long, because I think what kind of got me to the point where I wasn't doing it as often is I used to wait way too long. I'd apply all these updates and things would break because it was just, I won't talk about the length of time we're talking about here, but so now I've learned, I'm like, it's better to stay on top of it and keep moving as it's happening, because when it breaks, right away, and it's just not that it does.
It's definitely easier to track it down. It's definitely easier to track a regression down if something does break and you've only updated 3 packages in the last week. Then it's a lot easier than having a pile of 160 packages that you haven't updated.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have. For a while, I think I had to join don't upgrade my system anonymous or something, some sort of
So one thing that's really cool about Ubuntu, and not a lot of other Linux distributions do this, is for people who run servers and want to reduce the quantity of updates that they get, our security updates are in a different pocket. We have a pocket called security. So you don't have to install the updates pocket to get security updates. You can only install the security updates themselves. Actually, I think the unattended upgrades package actually does this. It only installs the security updates. So if you're running a server and you don't want to get all the bug fixes, you only want to get stuff that is security sensitive, you can only install the security updates if you want.
Yes, I was going to plug the unattended upgrades package actually. It's a really, really easy way to make sure that you have automation for just the pieces that you want. So when you first do apt-get install unattended upgrades, it asks you if you want to turn the whole thing on or leave it off. It's actually installed by default in Cloud Images, but I think it's turned off by default. And you can do dpkg reconfigure unattended upgrades to turn it on. But if you install the unattended upgrades package, you end up with some configuration files in etc apt.conf.d. As soon as I'm done talking, I'll type some of these so that people can find them on the IRC channel. And in there I can see that you can, by default, it looks like only the security pocket is enabled, as Mark described, so that reduces your regression risk because you're not just updating any arbitrary package, but you are picking up all the security updates. which I would, for the reasons we said before, pretty much essential. You do want to have installed those at some point. I can also see that there's a configuration option for automatic reboot, which is turned off by default, which I understand because you probably don't want that to happen to people without them expecting it. But you can turn it on. I have it turned on some of the servers that I've installed that I just don't care about on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure many people have servers like that. And those ones, I'll deal with it if there's a problem, but I'd rather not have it running for years with no updates installed ever. So it's pretty easy just to go and turn the thing on. I've turned on automatic reboots, I've turned on security updates, and now I don't really have to care about that anymore. I have the security team doing it for me.
Well, aren't you just the perfect little citizen there, Robbie? Whatever. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so next on the list, how do I secure my Ubuntu server? So this is another thing I see floating around every so often. I see people post blog posts of what they've done to secure their Ubuntu server. And I always wondered, if people are posting these things, why aren't we doing these things by default? So I see mentions of things like installing fail to ban. I see them moving SSH to a different port, that sort of thing. So do you have any comment on that? Or what should people be doing to secure their servers?
Right. So we try and be secure by default. In other words, we, as long as it doesn't affect usability or having stuff work, all the security improvements that people can come up with, we look at them and we try and see if it's something that we can do by default and whether it's worth doing or not. I see a lot of checklists that people publish on the internet, and they go, you need to do all of this if you want your server to be secure. And a lot of those recommendations are debatable. Sure, there's a lot of stuff that you can do that would marginally improve your security, but the basic stuff that you need to do is make sure you do your security updates. Make sure you disable password authentication using SSH and use only keys. That's something that comes up often. We often get people in Pound Ubuntu hardened that come in and go, oh, my server's been compromised. And once we dig into what happened, often they created a test account. They've got a server on the internet. They're using only passwords to authenticate, and the test account was created with a simple password, and that's how intruders got in. And it's pretty much always that. So disabling password authentication in SSH is definitely high on that list. And there's other things like, sure, fail to ban. Some people really like that. But that's not something that we could turn on by default because fail to ban is...
What is fail to bend?
It's fail to ban. It's a daemon that basically looks at...
Okay, a daemon, okay.
It's a daemon that basically looks at your SSH connections, and if it sees that somebody's trying to brute force a password or trying to abuse it, it will ban that IP address.
Oh, okay.
For a certain time. A lot of people recommend that, and sure, it has some value. I tend to think that it may be used against you as a denial of service mechanism, but it depends on how you configure it and how you set it up. And it's probably not something that we would want to try and configure by default, but a lot of people like it. Other recommendations. So one thing that we haven't...
Encrypting file systems or...
Sorry, excuse me?
Encrypting file systems.
Sure, there's a lot of things that you can do for physical access. If you're afraid that your computer will be compromised.
Oh, true. That maybe that's the laptop issue.
Right. You can encrypt your file system to prevent casual theft or prevent people from trying to obtain data off your disks.
Right, but that's probably less of an issue than actually people trying to hack into your system.
Right, exactly.
Your server.
So another tool that's really nice is UFW, which is the firewall tool that we have in Ubuntu that you can use to make sure that no unknown services are running on your server. So if you configure the firewall and you only leave the SSH port open and your web port open, then you can be assured that no rogue process can open ports, and or perhaps you can make sure that you don't mistakenly install some daemon that you weren't aware that it's listening to a port and it has not been secured or not. One of the things that we have in Ubuntu that's really nice is AppArmor. AppArmor is a tool that will allow you to confine processes that run on your server. A lot of people have web servers, for example, and AppArmor will allow them to confine their web server and make sure that even if PHP got compromised or their web application that they've developed had some security issues with it, it will be stuck in that container and can't escape that in order to try and obtain other resources on the server. So in the event that your website was compromised, that greatly limits what an attacker could do on your server.
So as an example of that, I run my own CalDAV server, and it's running some software called Radical, which is maybe not the most common thing run ever, and as a result it's in Universe. And I have in my list of questions which packages get official security updates. Well, Radical is an example of something that doesn't. Now, I didn't want to be able to stomp all over my server, so what I did was I wrote an AppArmor profile for it. So I know that if Radical is compromised, AppArmor will stop it doing anything apart from serving my calendar to somebody else or changing my calendar, because that's all that I'm allowing Radical to even do on my server as a process.
Right, exactly. You limit the amount of damage that somebody could do if they do compromise one of the services or the web pages that you're running.
Right.
So that's something that's definitely worth looking at if you're a sysadmin and you're managing web servers or any kind of network exposed services. It's definitely worth looking into.
Okay, so I've just noticed a couple of questions on IRC, or at least one, which is that Helen asks, how do we know we need to reboot? I'm not sure how much you covered that. I know that there is a file that appears, and I don't know to what extent other tools tell you.
Right. So generally, any package that we have in the archive that we update, the package has the possibility of telling the system that this will require a reboot. We generally only do it for the kernel, perhaps a couple of other things. We used to do it with OpenSSL on the desktop, but we don't do it on the desktop anymore, but we still do it on the server. So what that does is if you're on the desktop, you'll get the reboots are required dialog box once you're finished running Update Manager. If you're on a server, you will get a MOTD message. So the next time you log in, that message of the day that appears on your server, it will say that your security updates require a reboot. So that will tell you that your kernel's been upgraded, either because you did it manually or because unattended updates did it, and that tells you that you need to reboot your server.
Okay, great. And the other note on IRC was that Smoza said that Cloud pointed out that cloud images come with SSH password authentication disabled by default. So I guess that's one less worry for people using cloud images.
That's great.
I'll comment on the var run reboot required also. Our cloud images, if you pass cloud init data that says update on first boot, it'll apt-get update, apt-get apply your upgrades. And then it will also, if that file's there, as a kernel update is required or something, you can also make it reboot. So then when it comes up and when network services are available, it's already patched all the way up.
Dobie asks, is that AppArmor profile Radical in the package? If not, can you generalize it and get it in the package? I'd love to. I probably should. I'm happy to share it. I just hadn't really considered. Part of the catch with Radical was that it's a really basic tool. It doesn't ship with a init script. So I had to write an init script, and I had to decide where to put stuff. And as a consequence, the AppArmor profile that I've written is customized to where I put stuff, so it doesn't really make sense with an init script. So that's the reason I hadn't really published it, but I'm not really sure to what extent I want to go to try and get it in the package, because I want to need to put an init script in the package as well that works with it.
Right.
So
So we
I
do
can
have
share it as a contrib or something so that people can customize it to their own needs, sure.
we do have a bazaar tree for a whole bunch of AppArmor profiles that we have that aren't necessarily ready to be included in packages because either they're not ready yet or because they can't be generalized. So that could possibly be a good place to put it until somebody decides to do a proper init script and get that generalized.
If someone pokes me after this call, or if I remember, I'll happily publish it somewhere so that people can grow on what I've done there. So almost at the end of our list of questions, I think, and then we can look forward to some mean tweets. So next question, I think, is how do I know which packages get official security updates?
This used to be a complicated question when we had a split. Before we used to support server for 5 years and we used to support desktop for 3 years. That was in the Ubuntu 10.04 era. Now that we support all releases for 5 years, starting with Ubuntu 12.04 precise, it's very simple. If a binary package is in the main repository, that means the Ubuntu security team officially does security updates for it. If it's in the universe or the multiverse repository, that means it's community supported. And security updates are depending on whoever volunteers to do them. Some packages are really well maintained in the universe repository. For example, there's a few people who take care of VLC. Every time VLC has a security issue, patches arrive quickly. And some other packages in universe aren't used by that many people, so they don't get timely security updates. If you're running a server, I suggest you look at the binary packages you have installed and figure out what repository it comes from. And if you're using stuff from the universe repository, just make sure that somebody's updating it, or you are, whichever.
So how would I go about on a server figuring out which of the installed packages that I have come from main and which have come from somewhere else?
So you can use app cache policy, and that will tell you which repository it came from. The example I gave before for OpenSSL, for example, if you look at the if you type app-cache policy libssl 1.0.0 and you look at where that version came from, it will give you the archive, and it says something like trusty-update/main, which means that binary package came from main. So that would be officially that would get official security updates. If you do the same thing with something from universe, I don't have an example, but if you find a package that's in universe and you do the same thing, you'll see that it's from the universe pocket.
Docker would be a universe package.
Docker?
Docker is, if you want an example.
Right. So Docker would be in universe, which means it's community maintained.
Okay. I think we're done with that. I don't see any other questions on ISE. So we have one final one. Will Ubuntu switch to LibreSSL?
That's a good question. At this stage, we don't know. Most likely we'll follow whatever Debian does. But right now, LibreSSL did a lot of cleanup by ripping all the platform-independent code from OpenSSL. So it basically doesn't work on Linux anymore. Somebody needs to do the same thing as portable OpenSSH and add back a whole compatibility layer for it to work on Linux. I think some people have started that work. But the other thing is, OpenSSL is still maintained. It's not as if the main upstream project is dead or unmaintained. And I believe there's a whole bunch of tech giants that have now contributed to fund the OpenSSL project, and they have just, I believe, hired 2 full-time people, additional full-time people, in order to perform code cleanup, in order to do better maintenance of OpenSSL itself. So we now basically have two competing projects. One of them is a fork, but the main project also sees value in trying to clean up and discover security issues. Honestly, at this stage, I don't know. I suspect we'll be using OpenSSL for the future, for a while yet.
Okay, thanks very much. I think that concludes all the questions that I had. Has anyone in the Hangout got any questions that they'd like to ask? I've also asked on IRC. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, this is your opportunity. If we don't get any more questions, then we can move on to getting the security team to read mean tweets. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to.
I'll do the ticking clock. Look. Oh, she don't know how to stop these effects. Oh, damn it! I keep starting it over. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, I think that's long enough. So, over to the security team for the mean tweets.
Come on, are you guys gonna rotate? So Seth, we can't see you.
Yes, it worked last time I used Hangouts. I don't know what happened to my camera.
All right.
I
mean, Seth. This account is only used for work Hangouts.
Correct.
That's your name. Okay.
It's not quite as funny to watch a white box talk.
I know. Well, especially because I think some of these require the use of air quotes. If I'm hoping.
So who wants to read a mean tweet? Seth?
Come on, Mark.
I've been talking a while now, Seth.
I know you're probably looking forward to a break, but I can't actually find that tab full of all the tweets we collected.
Hold on.
I know John wants to.
Tabs, nothing funny open.
There you go. I just gave it to you. Okay, I'll read the first one. I'm not sure I can take this Ubuntu security notice seriously. It begins, Pinkie Pie discovered a flaw, but it grabbed my attention. From JMK Green. Yeah, we don't usually publish Ubuntu security notices with aliases, but in this case, it's somebody who is well known, so we decided to do it.
Go with Pinkie Pie.
Pinkie Pie. I love that, Pinkie Pie. Did you find the tab, Seth?
Yeah. Ubuntu takes security seriously when they issue security issues 2 days after Debian equivalent issue. That's from Jens Rantil. Yes, it's true that we sometimes issue updates later than they do, especially for the universe maintained packages. Every distribution has to prioritize issues as they see fit, and sometimes our priorities don't line up with other groups, and sometimes it's beneficial. We had Heartbleed fixes out the same day. Other groups were issuing them a week later. We've had some fantastic emergency kernel turnaround times with some pretty severe issues that now we've got updates out within a day, and other groups might wait a week or 2 weeks. And sometimes we're on the other side of that equation. It's just the way it happens.
Yep. Even though Ubuntu comes from Debian, we don't, from a security point of view, we don't usually track the Debian updates because our stable releases and the Debian stable releases don't usually coincide in versions. So we usually do our security stuff by ourselves in our own corner, and they do their own, and sometimes we share stuff. But yeah, we don't collaborate to publish our updates at the same time. We prioritize differently.
All right, cool. So who's reading the next one? All right.
So where is it? Ubuntu.
This is why.
This is why Canonical put stable in quote marks from Ubuntu 14.04 release. We try. We really do try. There just are updates that will break things. We do regression testing. We have a a great QA lab that's testing all these updates, especially on the kernel. I mean, we have a 3-week kernel cadence where we pull in patches and we hammer on it for 3 weeks with our tests, or, well, 2 weeks really, about before we actually release a kernel. And unfortunately, updates from upstream, there's things that change. We can't test everything, and sometimes things go down. We have gotten a lot better than we used to be, and we're still working on improving our QA, and we will get better still.
All right, who's next? Scott, are you saying I'm a security team member?
So it's back to me, or is somebody
I think
volunteering
it's
to
back
read
to
the
you.
next?
I think Scott's trying to volunteer me.
I was trying to volunteer Pat, and then
I'm happy to do one. I can read the next one. Someone at Canonical decided to have Ubuntu servers download entropy over the internet. Seriously, no joke. Pound YOLO, and it gives you URL, and NZKOZ said it. That's all.
Yeah.
No, we don't have to explain Jimmy Kimmel. We just keep saying them because they're funny.
Oh, so we don't. Oh, we don't.
No,
get
you
to-
don't have to justify it. You guys are friggin' awesome. No need to justify it. Just this is the funny part, people.
No, I
We
think
know
this.
you're awesome and you're doing your best.
I actually think this is really cool. Yes, it may appear funny that we would want to download entropy over the internet, but the fact is, cloud instances, when they come up, there's no entropy. There's no network activity. There's nobody banging away at a keyboard. There's nobody moving a mouse. So if you start 100,000 cloud instances, you hope that you don't get, bad entropy generating duplicate SSH keys.
Yeah.
So yes, this tool, what it does is when cloud instances start up, we seed the PRNG with a random seed that's pulled from the internet, and that's enough to make sure that we're not generating bad entropy generated OpenSSH keys.
All right, you're up next, Mr. Mark.
Okay. Oh, I get this one. Ubuntu is still a joke. Privacy is hard. Let's go shopping. This is from @Lix or @Prismatic, one of the two. So I gather we're talking about the Amazon shopping lens.
you can just go on.
Go on to the next one. Who's up next for the next one?
I actually don't think this is a big privacy issue. So we're trying to compete today with a whole bunch of other operating systems that are really smart in this regard, where users don't want to care where they're searching. All they want to do is type in a search term and get results, whether those results are local, whether the results are in their pictures that are in the cloud, and whether the results are online sources of data like dictionaries and stuff like that. People just want to search and get results. The thing that I think got people was the fact that it's the main tab of the dash, where people traditionally search for local stuff. And we moved that to another tab in the dash. The main tab is now the global search tab. So if you're looking for something local, don't use the main tab. Just use another one beside it. And if you really think that the global search feature is a privacy issue, then by all means go into the privacy applet in the control panel and flip that big switch and turn it right off.
All right.
Okay, who's next?
I'm going to skip the security fail because I don't actually see content there.
Okay, that's fine.
So I'm going to go on to the next one, which looks awesome. It's 4 words. AppArmor is to suck. Period. No gray. And from that being from 2009, I guess I could kind of understand. It's improved a lot since then.
So I just assume that
We had to go back to find a lot. So.
yeah, I just assume this is somebody trying to attack Robbie's server.
This just
Spoiled
reminds
by
me,
AppArmor.
my experience of the alternative to AppArmor, ST Linux, is that, oh, this is going back a while, but all I remember is nobody could use it, and if you Googled around, everyone just said, turn it off. Which to me is the alternative. So I think it's good that we're getting that tweet, because that means people are actually using AppArmor.
I could do the next one, which is "Damn you, AppArmor, damn you," from Gareth Greenaway.
That's pretty good. I like that. I've said that myself.
All the time.
All right. Any more?
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Canonical will remove Java from Ubuntu. From Nick Raptis in 2011. So in 2011, basically, Oracle changed their licensing on their Java binaries, and we could not distribute them anymore. So rather than keeping the insecure ones, we decided to remove them completely from the archive. At first, we announced that we would be nulling out the packages on people's deployed servers, which we later backed down on, and we simply removed them from the archive. A few months later, the same vulnerable Java versions were being compromised in a botnet. So, yeah, I think we did the right choice there. Sorry for all you Java admins that had to manually reinstall the latest Java from Oracle, but that's the way it is.
It sounded like there was just no good thing to do to resolve the
No.
situation.
There wasn't. We couldn't update them, and we just couldn't leave our users vulnerable like that. Unfortunately, we were stuck with that, and we had to do that. Who's next? I nominate Seth.
All right. This one's probably my favorite. Linux is totally secure. The only reason my Ubuntu system patches itself constantly is that it likes to look busy and productive. Yes.
Yeah. So people who asked us what the security team does, that's what we do. We make your system appear busy and productive. And we annoy you with security update warning boxes. And we actually remove the button so you have to reboot and you can't dismiss that window. Just to annoy you. That's what we do.
All right. Any others?
Okay, I got one. Heartbleed is such a huge security bug, but it's hard to take seriously on Ubuntu because part of the fix is this: service whoopsie restart. Sorry, that meant it's funny. That was from GK Nos. Yeah, that's funny.
All right.
How about the last one here?
Okay.
Oh, you were volunteering, Zeth?
Sure. OpenBSD feels like it's been engineered. Ubuntu feels like it's been deposited layer by layer over time, like guano in a bat cave. Sure.
These are awesome.
Right. Okay. All right.
So I had one final comment to make if we're done with the tweets.
Yeah,
which
we
is-
got to end on the guano in a bat cave high note.
It just occurred to me that, I mean, this is maybe true of Linux distributions, but not necessarily of other security advisories and other security teams, is that when you get a security update from a traditional proprietary vendor, you can be shaking your fist at that vendor for having created that vulnerability in the first place. But I just thought that our team's pretty unique amongst those in that they're only ever fixing other people's stuff. So I just wanted to give really a huge thanks to the security team for doing what they do for us.
Thank you.
Just fixing our mess.
Right,
Well,
we
other
pick up
people's
after
mess.
other people.
Yeah.
We're like the garbage men.
It's just, you guys like scrape up guano and bat caves. Mm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they're working in
Matt.
that back cave.
Yes, I would like to thank everybody for making my eyes bleed at least twice a week when I look at some code that people write. Thanks for that.
Anyway, well, thank you so much, guys, and have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.
But
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.